Hello everybody. For me, one of the most interesting developments in the world of cars over the last 10 years has been the rise of the Japanese automobile. Where once these were viewed with disdain by just about anybody that had something German, Italian, British, even whisper it, French or American, now, when on the auction block, these can easily trade blows with the best of the best. And though in a lot of ways this is a bit of a sad thing, because it means there are no longer the bargains out there that there used to be, I think in all this is a good thing, because it means there is an interest in keeping these cars going. But this has also created another problem, because the difficulty becomes working out what is actually that good and what is simply overrated. And for me, in that latter category, I have to put the Subaru Impreza 22B. It is controversial, I know, and for many, the 22B is the greatest of all road-going Imprezas. And that's one reason maybe that today they can command in excess of £250,000. It's a very nice car, but I don't think it really drives any better than just about any other classic Impreza I've ever gotten behind the wheel of. However, what about the rest of the road-going Impreza lineup? If I don't love the 22B, what actually is the best Subaru Impreza of all time? Well, there is a theory that says it could be this, the 2007 WRX STI Spec C Type RAR. But with just 300 ever having been made, they're fairly rare. And so I, today, am very lucky to have finally got my hands on one, and I can now tell you whether this really is the greatest Subaru ever made. What exactly is one of these? What makes it different? And why is it that this might succeed where the 22B fails? Well, I have to be honest with all of you. Trying to research this car has been incredibly difficult, not just because it is very rare, but also because it was a Japanese market only model, and therefore most of the literature is not in English. The rise of AI has also meant that when I've asked Google to give me information on it, it has returned stuff that I know is not applicable to this car. But more than that, this is not just a model, it is a model within a model within a model within a model. Let me explain that to you. So what we have here is the Subaru Impreza WRX STI Spec C Type RAR. Even by Japanese standards, that is a bit of a mouthful. So how does it break down? Well, first off, Subaru. I think we can gloss over that. I'm pretty sure you know what one of those is. The same goes for Impreza. Once you get to the WRX bit though, things do get a little more interesting. That stands for World Rally Experimental, and chances are, if you are a petrol head, that's the only flavour of the Impreza you've ever really been interested in. The STI is then the full fat version of that, and the one that most people tend to think of, with a lot of WRXs out there often being made up to look like the STI. And for a long time in Britain, we didn't actually even get the STI. It only really made an official appearance here in the 2000s with the arrival of what's called the new age of Impreza. That started with the Bug Eye, of which I owned an example, that then turned into the Blob Eye, and then finally the Hawkeye. This. But for the sake of argument, these are all effectively underneath the same thing. They're just facelifts mechanically, not masses changed between them. By the time you then get to the Spec C, which was in of itself a model you could buy, things start getting really interesting. The Spec C is the more hardcore, lightweight version. Didn't really have any more go than the regular WRX STI, but thanks to a number of different features, it was a little sharper, a little harder, a little more hardcore. And as far as, I suppose you might call it, cooking variants of the WRX STI go, that was as extreme as it got. But For this generation, Subaru decided to take it even further, and they made the Spec C Type RA, which stood for Record Attempt. They decided they wanted to go at this whole Nürburgring thing, and so built a car specifically for that purpose. And it was essentially a Spec C that they threw just about every bit of the optional STI catalogue at. I've driven a Spec C Type RA, and I loved it because it was a very, very good car. But apparently, for somebody at Subaru, even that was not enough. And that's where this model comes in, the Type RAR, which stands for Record Attempt Racy. Yeah, I'm not joking. I have found a couple of sources that quote that, and one other that says it stands for Record Attempt Radical. It's Japanese, I would believe either of them. Now, the difficulty that I've had is not just in working out what the specification of this car is, but in which bits are actually specific to the RAR. Because there are many that apply to the RA, and then there are many that apply to the Spec C, and of course a few that also apply to simply the STI. So, Subaru Anorax of the world, I beg you, anything I get wrong or anything I've missed that you know, hop into the comment section and tell me. But what have I learned? What do I know? Well, up front you will find the classic Subaru flat 4 boxer engine. This is based on the Japanese market only S204 model. So it's 2 litres, unlike the later 2.5 litre, which is generally seen as a bad thing that we got in the UK, Europe and in the USA. It is more or less fully forged. This also has, specific to the model, a larger turbo setup, a revised intercooler featuring water spray, a revised intake and a remap, which gives it a quoted power figure of 320 horses and torque of around 316 pounds-feet. That's 430 newton meters. Whether that's still true today or not, I do not know, because the car would have been built for Japanese market fuel, which is higher octane than we regularly get here in the UK. The car also weighs some 70 kilos less than a regular STI for an all-in wet curb weight of 1,390 kilos. This was achieved through the use of thinner glass, a lightweight battery, model-specific 18-inch Enki alloys, and the removal of much of the sound insulation. These even came from the factory with either no wing or one specific to the RAR, which looks very much like the one on the RA and is not actually the wing on this car, though it does look almost identical, making the car not just faster on track, but also less prone to understeer on the road. The suspension setup is bespoke to the RAR, so it is both lower and stiffer than any of the other models. It also features aluminium lateral links and pillow ball mounts. Helping you then stop the thing are also, I believe, specific to the RAR, 6-pot Brembo monoblocks at the front and 4 pots at the rear. These are fairly serious brakes, and by all accounts, they do take a little bit of effort to get them warmed up. When you're at low speeds and you haven't been working them, they can take a little bit to get them to respond, although thus far I haven't had an issue with them. Naturally, this being a Subaru, it also came with their patented symmetrical all-wheel drive system, and this one has DCCD, which is driver-controlled center differential. In other words, push a button down here and scroll a wheel, and you can dictate to the car where it should shuffle the power. I have left it, as I know most do, in auto. The gearbox is a 6-speed manual. The car does still have air conditioning. This one has had a Pioneer head unit retrofitted, and I do believe that the exhaust is non-standard. Although I have to say, it doesn't sound particularly fruity. Though you would be forgiven for wondering why it doesn't sound like a Subaru at all. And that is because this, as with many other Japanese market Imprezas, has equal length manifolds and a twin scroll turbo, which between them make it sound like a regular inline 4, as opposed to the distinctive classic burble of a Subaru that you probably expect. Visibility is excellent. The car is packaged just like every other Impreza of the age, so it's actually got a good amount of space in here. The boot is a very decent size. The doors feel really light. The rear space is actually a pretty decent size. These STI seats are quite firm but pretty good. The gearbox, very heavy, short throw but pretty decisive. The dash, classic analog setup. And this example, which Greg had freshly imported from Japan only a few months ago, feels box fresh, in spite of the fact it is showing some 83,000 kilometers. Now, most painfully of all, when new, though these weren't sold here in Britain, a few magazines did test them, and at the time, the equivalent price was just £18,000. Yeah. A few years ago, they still weren't worth masses, with some going at auction for 30 to 40. Today, though, the market appears to be cottoning on to them, and now there is one example up for sale at 70,000 quid. But it's been there for a while, and maybe it's an optimistic price. But regardless, this clearly is a car that the enthusiasts and the speculators are both becoming increasingly aware of. My question, though, is that with good reason? Well, time to put my foot down and find out. Now, I mentioned earlier that this car belongs to a lovely chap called Greg, and he's going to hate me for doing this, but I have to tell you a little bit about Greg, because you see, he's very important to me. Back when I was thinking of buying a Lotus Evora 400, he'd got one, and at that point in time, there weren't very many in the country or the world, full stop. And yet, because he knew that I was thinking about getting myself into my first Lotus, he and a few of his friends got together, showed me their cars, took some time out, and proved to me that Lotus was a brand full of really, really good people. And as history fans of the channel will know, it is a Lotus Evora 400 where my story began. And Greg had a really big hand in that, and so, in a lot of ways, he was kind of responsible for what later became one of the best decisions I ever made. And like all good Lotus people, Greg is not particularly wedded to any one particular brand. Instead, he just likes good cars, in whatever shape or form they may come. He currently has a couple of TVRs, he's got another older Lotus, but in the past he's had a weakness for Subarus, and in fact, both of his children came home from the hospital in a Subaru. And he said to me that the day his Bug-Eye left, he basically wept because he knew that he was going to miss it dearly. But he resolved to one day buy one of these. And then, a while back, he found himself in Japan, found one of these cars, spoke to Talk GT, and they imported it for him. Was he mad? No, not a bit of it. Because you see, this is not just a ruddy good Subaru. This might be, as a thing to have fun in and get from point A to point B, one of the best cars I have ever driven. This thing is awesome. Now, that quoted power, 320 horses, I believe it. Every single one of them feels to me like it's there. It responds pretty good, yeah, there's a bit of turbo lag, but it also revs hard from 2 to 8,000 RPM. In fact, the whole time I've been having fun with this, I haven't really had a chance to fully let the thing off its leash because, well, I haven't needed to. When I get it turned around, I'm going to find a little bit of clear road and see if I can, because this thing's awesome. Oh, get it going and it just sings. The gearbox then is a great match for that engine, but the star of the show has to be the chassis. Now, I've got myself in a lot of trouble in the past when I talk about Imprezas, because I've often said I don't think they're great handling cars. And people say to me, well, hang on a minute, you're talking at your backside. How can that be? I mean, they're awesome, they're epic. I mean, they're so quick. Yeah, they are, but they're also really, really front heavy. They don't have particularly big or grippy tyres. This one's only on 235s. And this means that in terms of both braking and cornering, they're compromised. This one though, not a bit of it. The steering's not especially heavy, nor particularly quick for that initial turn-in, but it does exactly what you tell it to. Feels in some ways a little bit like an old school 911 GT3. And I've driven a few of those recently. The brakes then, they're fantastic. That pedal really firms up when they get warm, and they're awesome. You have complete confidence in the things. And you know what, let's just slow this down and show you how quick this car can be. Right, we're in second gear now. I mean, I'm revving it fairly high. It's at 3,500 RPM, and we're at 30 mile an hour. Foot down, there's the boost. And that's the top of it, and that's basically 60. Wow! I mean, it's not actually, in the grand scheme of things, that quick, but it feels fast, it's interactive, and it just grips, but in an entertaining way. It doesn't feel just uninvolving or unexciting. And I know, that sounds like me being a bit oxymoronic, but it's mega. It just does exactly what you tell it to. I also got to give a shout out to one of the best views in motoring, that iconic Subaru scoop at the front. That is awesome. Now, it's bone dry out there today, but it is chilly. 9 degrees apparently, and you can feel it. Even so, this thing is finding plenty of grip. Yeah, that brake pedal's lovely. Oh, wow. Throws you out of a corner, this thing. It's epic. I would say that once you get to about 6,000 RPM or so, there's not really a reward for keeping it pinned to 8, but neither are you punished for it. It doesn't start to bleed away the power or anything like that. Blimey. If you have got a little bit of part throttle on as well, the response you get from that engine is magnificent. This would embarrass a lot of more modern and far more expensive cars in terms of response and brakes and feel. Wow. Now, it is a little firm. I will give it that. Is it crashy? No, but it sits very, very close to it. As a daily, I think this would be too much. But I can forgive that when this is the WRX STI Spec C Type RAR. This is like the GT3 RS Visac pack equivalent. So when you sign up for something like this, you know you're not in for a nice cosseting, comfy ride. Now, does it feel markedly different to the regular Type RA? You know, I'd need to get them back to back to tell you. I'm sure it is a better car. I'm sure it does move the game on in a way. And it's special, partly because it's rare. Just 300 of these made in one of 3 colours. They built 50 in a gorgeous yellow, which I am partial to, the remainder being either white, which was Greg's first choice, or classic Subaru blue. You also have in here, like in the RA and the rally car, a little vent up here you can pop open, although not above 50 mile an hour, Subaru warn you, and that'll fill the cabin with quite a lot of air. Now, apparently there are 2 competing theories as to what this is for, one of which being the obvious keep the driver cool, and the other apparently being to generate more pressure inside the cabin to stop dirt being flung into it from outside. That sounds believable, doesn't it? But it also sounds like one of those stories you get told because it sounds believable. But I haven't driven a Spec C, so I couldn't tell you how it compares to one of those. I have, though, driven both the WRX and the STI, and this is night and day different. It is. I know you can get the engine of an STI easily to do basically what this does, but the rest of it, though, this doesn't feel like an Impreza. It's that different. This goes down a road, and I know to some this might be a criticism, but trust me, it's meant as a compliment, more like a Civic Type R. This has a real purpose about it, a real ferocity. It's not got that around the hips adjustability of, say, a GR Yaris or a Delta Integrale. It's a little more planted, partly I think because it's a bigger car with a longer wheelbase, etc, etc. I just got some abuse there from some old people who decided to overtake some parked cars and go onto my side of the road even though I had right of way. That is the downside of having an Impreza. Unfortunately, they still carry a bit of a stigma, and I guarantee you, if I were in a Jag, same said old people would have gone, "So sorry, sir, please do pardon me." In any case, this is, like I said, not just a great Impreza, this is a great car. And Greg's bought it for having a bit of fun, as and when he wants to, and I think for that it's absolutely sensational. If you want something to daily drive, one of the other quote-unquote lesser cars is going to be better for the job. But to put a smile on your face, this thing's awesome. To bring back a 1990s phrase, it's wicked. And I am incredibly grateful to Greg, not just for bringing his car out, but also his generosity at the very, very beginning of this amazing adventure that is my life. So, all that remains to be said is a big thanks to all of you for watching, and don't forget, hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.